Imagine this. A storm rages against the cliffside, waves like iron fists pounding the rocks, the sky split open with lightning. In the distance, a single beam of light cuts through the night, the lighthouse. But this is no sanctuary, no safe haven guiding ships to shore. For those who stepped into this light, their final breath would taste not of salt air, but of betrayal. Because the family who lived inside did not just guard the sea, they fed on it. And sometimes they fed on those who came seeking refuge. The official records whisper about storms, accidents, disappearances. But the truth? The truth was whispered in bars, in dockside alleys, and in journals that never saw the public eye. That travelers, sailors, and wandering strangers never left this lighthouse alive. You're about to hear the story no one wanted to believe, because believing it would mean acknowledging that civilization is only a thin veil, and beneath it, something ancient and hungry has always waited. The family themselves were not extraordinary at first glance. A father hardened by years of watching waves crush men into pulp. A mother whose silence was mistaken for devotion. And children who learned early that the sea took as much as it gave. To outsiders, they were simply keepers of light. But every family has its rituals, its private traditions. And theirs began with scarcity. During one brutal winter, the sea froze, supplies never arrived, and hunger clawed at their bones. What they did to survive was supposed to be temporary, a dark secret buried under the weight of necessity. But necessity became appetite, and appetite became tradition. When spring came and food returned, the taste of human flesh did not leave their tongues. Instead of shame, they discovered something darker: power. Because eating another person was not just survival, it was dominance, control, a ritual of possession. And the whispers began. Locals told stories, but no one dared speak too loudly. After all, lighthouses were sacred guardians of the coast. To suggest that one was a slaughterhouse was to spit in the face of order. Yet the disappearances stacked like bones. Sailors who docked for repairs, drifters seeking shelter, even lost travelers caught in storms, gone. The family explained each case with a rehearsed rhythm. The sea took them, the storm swallowed them, they left in the night. Authorities recorded these explanations with lazy pens because the alternative would mean digging into something they didn't want to face. To accuse the Lighthouse family would be to admit that those entrusted with protection could be predators. And the human mind is fragile. It prefers lies that keep the world clean over truths that soil every corner. That fragility became the family's shield. But here is the twist: they did not simply eat. They ritualized. Every act of consumption was wrapped in symbolism. The father claimed it was a form of inheritance, that by consuming a man you stole his strength, his will, his secrets. The mother whispered prayers not to God, but to the sea itself, as if offering each victim back to the abyss from which all things come. The children, indoctrinated since birth, grew up believing that their survival depended on feeding the ocean's hunger through themselves. This was no mere crime. It was religion. And in religion, the unthinkable becomes sacred. This is why no one believed the rumors. Because what sane person imagines that a family would turn cannibalism into ritual, not in the wilderness, not in famine, but in plain sight, beneath the revolving light meant to save lives? The disbelief itself was the perfect camouflage, and yet proof leaked. A sailor's torn boot found buried near the lighthouse grounds. A bloodstain on stone steps, scrubbed but never gone. Diaries from neighboring keepers who admitted, quietly, trembling, that they saw visitors enter the lighthouse but never exit. The whispers spread, but here is the paradox. The louder the truth became, the harder it was to believe. People laughed, dismissed it as drunken tales, superstition, the way common folk invent monsters to make sense of disappearance. But isn't that the cruelest trick? That the real monsters hide behind laughter, shielded by the very absurdity of their crimes? The lighthouse stood, its beam cutting across the Black Sea, a symbol of safety, while within knives gleamed, prayers rose, and flesh became ritual. And still no one dared call it what it was. Because to do so would mean admitting that sanctuary and slaughterhouse can exist in the same place at the same time. Think about this. Lighthouses were government property, state-funded symbols of safety. If word spread that one family turned theirs into a temple of flesh, what would that mean for the entire system? Trust would shatter. Sailors would refuse to dock, ships would drift, and commerce would break. So what was easier, to investigate and expose? Or to silence, deny, bury? The institution chose denial. Reports that hinted at foul play were redacted. Families who demanded answers were told their loved ones drowned. And every time suspicion rose, another storm came, sweeping away evidence. But ask yourself, were those storms truly accidents, or did the family learn how to use chaos as their ally? The sea, after all, can erase all sins. And what is bureaucracy if not another tide washing truth into oblivion? Yet, behind closed doors, whispers reached further than taverns. Old sailors spoke of strange carvings etched inside the lighthouse, runes not of Christian faith but of something far older. Symbols that suggested the family was not simply indulging hunger, but invoking forces beyond themselves. Some claimed the family descended from wreckers, coastal predators who once lured ships with false lights to steal their cargo and slit the throats of survivors. Others swore they were tied to an ancient cult that worshipped the sea as a devourer. Whether history or myth, one thing became clear: they did not see their victims as men. They saw them as offerings. And what happens when an offering is repeated generation after generation? The ritual becomes identity. The family no longer asked, "Should we?" They asked only when. And here lies the psychological trap. When people hear of cannibalism, they imagine savages, distant tribes, or starving castaways. They do not imagine quiet families tending lanterns and whitewashed towers. That dissonance becomes the strongest defense. Impossible, people say. Unthinkable. But the unthinkable is precisely where truth hides. The mind shields itself from horror by denying it exists. This is why victims kept walking through the lighthouse doors. Because no matter how many warnings, no matter how many rumors, the human brain clings to safety. It insists, "This place is built to save me." And so men entered, trusting the light. They did not know they were stepping into a mouth disguised as sanctuary. And once the door closed, the ocean outside was no longer their enemy. The family was one of the most chilling accounts came from a shipwrecked crew who managed to escape. They told of being welcomed with warm blankets, fire, and soup. But as night deepened, they noticed the stares, children peering through cracks in the door, eyes unblinking. The mother humming a song that sounded less like comfort and more like a chant. When one crewman wandered to the kitchen, he saw what he thought was salted pork hanging from hooks. But the shape of the bones betrayed the truth. Panic erupted. They fled into the storm, half naked, some never making it to shore. Their testimony was dismissed, their terror mocked as hysteria brought on by exposure. And yet, their words echoed through generations. The lighthouse is not a light, it is a lure. But the question remains, how many others never escaped to tell their story? Here is where the conspiracy deepens. Because if one family could feed for decades without punishment, ask yourself, who protected them? Was it cowardice of local authorities? Or was it something darker? Complicity? Every system has shadows, and in those shadows, deals are struck. A missing sailor here, a forgotten vagrant there. Who would care? And if the family provided something in return, secrets, power, even flesh, then perhaps silence was not just ignorance. Perhaps it was transaction. This is how corruption hides. Not always in grand palaces but in wind-battered towers, where one family devours and the world looks away. And if the system can ignore that, What else has it ignored? What else has it fed? Ask yourself this: how many times have you trusted light? A street lamp guiding you home, a candle in a darkened room, the glow of a screen in your hand right now. Light feels safe because darkness terrifies. But what if light itself is the trap? The Lighthouse family understood this better than most. They knew men would sail blindly toward a beam no matter how deadly the rocks beneath it. They understood a basic truth of control: people follow symbols, not reality. And once you hold the symbol, you own their choices. The beam of light was not safety, it was obedience. It drew ships like moths to a flame, and once the sailors crossed the threshold, they were no longer men with free will. They were offerings walking willingly into the mouth of ritual. By the late 1800s, rumors had spread so far that neighboring communities began to notice patterns. Yet each time an inquiry was opened, records disappeared. Witnesses recanted. Clergymen defended the family's piety. Was it all coincidence? Or did something higher up ensure the silence? Consider this: many maritime nations depended on secrecy. Trade routes, wartime movements, hidden dealings. A lighthouse keeper often saw too much. Perhaps the family was useful. Perhaps they offered not only light but loyalty. And when loyalty came with the erasure of inconvenient travelers, the cost of silence suddenly became profit. You must understand, corruption does not always look like golden thrones. Sometimes it looks like a quiet family smiling on Sunday, while their cellar reeks of salt and rot. There is an even darker layer. Some researchers unearthed fragments of local lore suggesting the family did not act alone, that there were gatherings in the dead of night, figures from the mainland rowing across to join feasts hidden from history. If true, then this was no isolated horror but a network, a secret society masquerading as guardians of light. Think of the symbolism: light as safety, light as truth. But in their hands, light became deception, a mask. Do you see how the pattern repeats across time? The very institutions built to guide you, to protect you, can become the ones devouring you. Not with teeth, perhaps, but with loss, with lies, with silence. The Lighthouse family was not an anomaly. They were a mirror, and the psychological weight of this mirror is heavy. Because if a family can murder in the name of duty while the world applauds their service, what does that mean for the trust you give to uniforms, to officials, to symbols of safety? How much of your obedience is built not on truth, but on assumption? The Lighthouse family was never caught, never punished, never confessed. They died with their secrets, but not before passing them down, not before teaching their children the doctrine of hunger cloaked as necessity. Do you see? What begins as survival becomes ritual. What begins as ritual becomes identity. And what becomes identity cannot be killed by death. It survives in whispers, in descendants, in the very soil of the cliff where the lighthouse still stands. What else survives in plain sight, smiling at you? Now I want you to pause. You've been descending with me through this story, layer after layer, and maybe you felt the ground beneath you shift. That's the point. Because this isn't just about a family in a lighthouse. It's about you and what you are willing to believe. Most will laugh this story away just as people did then. But if you've followed me this far, you are not like most. You are awake enough to see that the absurdity is part of the design, the camouflage that hides predators in plain sight. And if you are awake, then lock it in. Prove it to yourself. In the comments, write twice the phrase, "I see the light, but I know the trap." Do this not as habit, but as initiation. Let it mark the moment you stop being a follower of light, and start being a seeker of what lurks behind it. The strangest part of this story is not the family's hunger. Hunger is human, primal, understandable. The strangest part is how the world bent itself to protect them. Think about that. A small coastal community, whispers of missing men, evidence buried in soil, stains that no storm could scrub away. And yet, no justice. No confrontation. Why? Because the family served a purpose greater than truth. They tended the light. They kept commerce alive. They represented order in a place where the sea was chaos. To remove them would be to admit vulnerability. And so the system, terrified of its own weakness, made a choice to preserve the symbol and sacrifice the souls. Isn't that the blueprint of all power? Sacrifice the truth to preserve the image. One diary, hidden for decades, described the rituals with disturbing clarity. It claimed the father taught his children to slice the flesh in silence, so the ocean could hear their devotion. It said the mother insisted bones be returned to the tide, because the sea swallows all debts. Whether embellished or not, the diary carried one chilling line: they will never catch us because they cannot afford to. Read that again. The family knew they were protected by the blindness of authority. They knew the more absurd their crimes sounded, the safer they became. This is why so many predators survive, because their existence is unbelievable. And when evil hides in absurdity, laughter becomes its most loyal guard. But the story does not end with the family's death. 4 years after, travelers spoke of hearing strange sounds near the abandoned lighthouse. Chanting carried by the wind, lanterns flickering with no keeper inside, silhouettes moving against the beam. Some swore the family's descendants returned in secret. Others believed the place had become a nest for something older, the sea itself feeding on the echoes of ritual. Whether supernatural or psychological, one truth remained: the lighthouse became a site of fear, not safety. Locals avoided it. Authorities ignored it. Yet thrill-seekers and drifters kept vanishing. The building stood as proof that once a place is marked with darkness, it carries that stain forever. Tell me, what stains exist in your world that no one dares acknowledge? Now notice the pattern. When horror is too large to face, people create stories to make it smaller. Ghosts, legends, curses. They wrap truth in myth, because myth feels safer than reality. The lighthouse became a campfire tale, a cannibal family, a cursed beam, shadows in the fog. But behind every myth is a transaction. The myth protects the truth from being believed. That way the system survives unshaken. Isn't that how all forbidden histories are hidden? Wrap atrocity in laughter, label it folklore, and the masses will dismiss it. But those who look closely, those who refuse the comfort of myth, see the raw truth still bleeding beneath the story. And once you see it, you cannot return to ignorance. You are changed forever. And so I ask you this: who benefits when truth is turned into legend? Who gains when atrocity is dressed as myth? Always follow the game, the power, the silence. The Lighthouse family's crimes are gone from official history not because they lacked evidence, but because their exposure would have shattered trust in the very idea of guardianship. What else has been erased this way? How many more lighthouses stand, not just by the sea but in every part of society, symbols meant to protect you but hiding predators inside? This story is not just about a family. It is about a system. And systems, like seas, devour without conscience. Once you see the pattern, you realize the light is never just light. It is always a lure. When you strip this tale down to its bones, you find a template, not just for murder, not just for survival, but for power. The Lighthouse family used hunger as excuse, ritual as justification, and light as bait. And every layer insulated the truth. Isn't that the same way institutions operate? They present need as justification, for safety, for order, for your own good. They wrap their actions in ritual, uniforms, ceremonies, prayers. And they wield symbols as bait, flags, laws, promises of protection. You follow the light, you obey the ritual, and by the time you realize you are inside the mouth, it is already closing. The lighthouse is not unique. It is a miniature model of the entire world. Think carefully. How many times have you obeyed a light you did not understand? When traffic signals order you to stop. When glowing screens demand your attention. When headlines tell you what to fear. Symbols have power not because they are true, but because we surrender truth to them. The sailors who entered the lighthouse never asked who lived inside. They trusted the beam. And so do you. Every day you trust beams far brighter, far more deceptive. The question is not whether the Lighthouse family existed. It is whether their method still exists, multiplied, institutionalized, scaled. And if you dare to admit that possibility, you realize you may already be inside a tower, and the meal has begun. There is another thread to pull. Survivors claimed the family whispered words during their rituals, words about inheritance, strength, the sea granting power. What if the family believed they were not consuming flesh, but consuming identity, taking into themselves the essence of their victims? You might dismiss this as madness, but think, isn't this the same logic behind empires? Nations consume other nations, erasing cultures, swallowing languages, absorbing wealth. Corporations devour smaller companies, inheriting their markets, their people, their power. On every level, consumption becomes inheritance. The Lighthouse family was not insane. They were simply enacting, in miniature, the same ritual the world itself thrives on. The only difference, they could not hide behind laws. Only storms.by now, maybe you feel the ground beneath you shifting. Maybe you feel the unease of realizing the story is not them. It is us. That's the trap most never escape. They point at monsters in towers, convinced the evil is isolated. But the true monster is always systemic. What terrifies is not a family who feasts in secrecy, but a society that does the same in daylight. Every tax paid into corrupt hands, every law bent toward control, every symbol used to blind you, it is the same ritual, only dressed in finer robes. The family may be gone, but the pattern survives. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The lighthouse becomes a mirror, and you realize, you are staring into its beam right now. Now, before we go further, hear me clearly, you must never mistake awareness for safety. Just because you see the pattern does not mean you are free of it. The sailors who noticed the strange stares, the salted meat that did not look right, many still died because realization came too late. Awareness must be paired with action. And for you, action begins here. Do not let the light hypnotize you. Question the ritual, the symbol, the story. And if this journey is awakening something inside you, then this is the moment. Subscribe now. Not because it is routine, but because you need more than routine. You need weapons, stories sharpened into blades, truths carved out of silence. If you do not arm yourself with them, you will remain prey. The lighthouse waits for the unarmed. There is a chilling truth hidden inside the concept of inheritance. When a family consumes, they do not just swallow flesh. They pass on belief. They hand ritual to the next generation like an heirloom. Think about what that means. A child does not choose what they eat, they are fed. A child does not choose what they believe, they are taught. The lighthouse children were raised in a world where consumption was not horror but holiness. To them, the knife was scripture, the flesh was communion, the silence was prayer. Do you see how easy it is for darkness to survive? Evil does not need to fight. It simply needs to be taught. And once a lie is dressed as necessity, it flows through bloodlines like inheritance. Not questioned, not resisted. Just obeyed. And here is where the story turns from grotesque to prophetic. Because if the family's ritual was inheritance, then so is ours. You inherit the myths of your nation, the customs of your people, the habits of your era. You do not question them because you are told they are survival. Work, obey, consume, the cycle is sacred. But who benefits? Who is fed? The lighthouse family fed on flesh. Our world feeds on time, attention, obedience. Every hour you give to symbols you never questioned is another offering burned at an altar you never chose. The family may be gone, but the system they mirrored thrives. And the longer you stay blind to it, the easier you are to devour. Section 28. Consider this. Some records claim the family kept meticulous logs. Not of ships saved, but of victims taken. Pages written in neat script, as though murder was as routine as cleaning the lamp. Numbers, names, notes. They recorded not for guilt, but for posterity. Why? Because they believed they were keeping history, their history. In their minds, they were not criminals but chroniclers of a sacred duty. And doesn't that echo something larger? How many times has history itself been written not by victims but by predators? The logs of empire, the archives of war, the reports of institutions. All neat, all orderly, all disguising blood as duty. The family's journals may have vanished, but the world is still written by hands just like theirs. The more you dig into this story, the more you feel it pressing back against you as though it does not want to be told. That is because it was never meant to be told. Absurdity is the shield. Bureaucracy is the wall. Ritual is the chain. And behind all three, silence reigns. The silence of authorities who refused to act. The silence of neighbors who dared not speak. The silence of the sea swallowing bones. And silence, my friend, is always the most dangerous accomplice. It does not scream, it does not strike, it does not cut. But it allows every scream, every strike, every cut to go unchallenged. The family's knife was sharp, but their greatest weapon was silence. And ask yourself honestly, in your own life, how often has silence fed the predator? Now we step into the darkest layer. Because there is one final truth hidden inside the lighthouse. They never saw themselves as villains. They saw themselves as chosen. Chosen by the sea. Chosen by hunger. Chosen to inherit power others were too weak to claim. And that is the most terrifying revelation of all. Monsters rarely see themselves as monsters. They see themselves as necessary. And once you believe you are necessary, any act can be justified. The family was not insane. They were consistent. They were logical inside their ritual. And that is why their story matters. Because every tyrant, every manipulator, every system that devours lives tells itself the same thing. We are chosen and therefore forgiven. And the world believes them. Just as no one believed the whispers of a lighthouse family on a cliff, no one believes the whispers of truth in their own time. Until it is too late. Imagine the last moments of those who entered the lighthouse. The storm outside howling, the light promising salvation. A warm hearth, blankets, a cup placed in trembling hands. For a moment, relief floods them. They believe they are safe. And in that instant of trust, the trap seals. Do you see the elegance of it? Predators thrive not in fear, but in comfort. Fear sharpens instincts. Comfort silences them. The family understood this truth with surgical precision. Make the victim feel safe, and they will walk willingly to the blade. This is not just the story of a family, it is the anatomy of all control. Systems don't conquer by terror alone. They conquer by comfort. By making you trust the light even as it guides you straight into the abyss. And yet, the true horror was not inside the lighthouse. It was outside, in the silence of those who suspected and did nothing. Fishermen who found boots on the rocks but shrugged. Officials who read reports of vanishing men and filed them away. Priests who blessed the family while ignoring rumors whispered in confession. Why? Because facing the truth would mean admitting their world was not safe. And humans will do anything to preserve the illusion of safety, even if it means abandoning the truth. Remember this. The predators could never have thrived without protectors. Every silence outside those walls was another offering. Every ignored cry was another body fed to the ritual. The lighthouse was not one family's crime. It was a community's conspiracy of denial. Here is the turning blade. We are no different. We laugh at ancient whispers, dismiss cannibal tales, mock the absurdity. But our laughter is the same silence that protected the family. Look around. How many scandals vanish overnight because they seem too outrageous to believe? How many predators walk free because the crime sounds impossible? It can't be real, we tell ourselves, and in that sentence we make it real. Absurdity is the cloak. Disbelief is the chain. Our refusal to confront the unthinkable is what allows it to thrive. You want to know why no one believed the lighthouse story? Because they chose not to. Belief would have demanded action. And action would have shattered the illusion of safety. So they clung to the lie. Just as we do, but you are still here. And that means something. It means you are not content with the illusion. You've walked further into this descent than most dare. And with that comes responsibility. To see the pattern. To recognize the lighthouses in your own life. The glowing symbols promising safety while hiding predators. To stop laughing at absurdity and instead ask, who benefits from me dismissing this? Because behind every joke, every dismissal, lies a predator smiling in the shadows. The Lighthouse family is dead, but their method is eternal. And if you do not sharpen your sight, you will feed it. The question is not if the system is still devouring. The question is, how much of you has already been consumed? Now hear me carefully. You are not meant to leave this story unchanged. The family's crimes were never punished, their secrets never exposed in their time. But now, in your hearing, the silence is broken. And when silence breaks, identity changes. You are no longer an audience. You are an inheritor of dangerous knowledge. The same way the family believed flesh carried power, stories carry power. The story is now in you. What will you do with it? Will you deny it, laugh it away, let it rot in disbelief, and become one of the silent protectors? Or will you carry it, sharpen it, let it change how you see the lights around you? If you understand, then mark yourself again. In the comments, write twice, I see the light, but I know the trap. This is not for me. It is for you. A ritual of your own. A refusal to be food. Think of how history remembers heroes. Uniforms, medals, monuments. But history buries predators in silence. The Lighthouse family left no statue, no plaque, no trial record. Officially, they were keepers of light. In reality, they were keepers of hunger. This dissonance is the essence of forbidden history. What you are told to honor and what you are forbidden to believe often live in the same place. The family was erased not to protect them, but to protect the system they mirrored. Because if one light could be corrupted, then all lights could be questioned. And questioning light is the most dangerous act of all. Once you question the beam, you start to wonder, what if safety is just another mask for control? And maybe that's the real reason no one believed. Not because the story lacked evidence, but because the story carried too much truth. To admit it would be to admit that predators wear the faces of guardians, that sanctuaries are not safe, that symbols betray. People protect themselves with disbelief. But disbelief is a poison. It numbs the mind, blinds the eye, and leaves you walking willingly into traps. That's why the absurd feels safe. That's why you laughed at first, but now you feel the weight in your chest. The absurdity is the armor. The truth is the blade inside it. And once it cuts, the wound never heals. That is what makes dangerous knowledge so dangerous. Once it enters you, you can never be what you were before. There is something else I must tell you. Legends say the lighthouse still stands, abandoned but intact, its beam automated now. Travelers swear they see shadows in the lantern room, moving where no keeper should be. Some say it is the family's ghosts. Others say it is the ritual, alive, feeding on anyone foolish enough to linger. But I tell you this, whether ghosts exist or not does not matter. The ritual lives on in silence, in denial, in obedience to symbols that mask predators. The lighthouse is not just a building. It is a metaphor woven into your life. Wherever you trust light without question, you are standing on the cliff's edge. The storm howls. The trap waits. And the family's lesson whispers still, not all who guard you are here to save you. So now you must choose. Will you return to the comfort of disbelief, laughing this away as a tale too grotesque to be real? Or will you carry it with you, let it change the way you see the world, sharpen the way you read symbols, and refuse the rituals meant to blind you? Remember, awareness alone is not safety. Action is safety. To comment, to subscribe, to keep returning here is not just habit. It is weaponry. It means you refuse silence. It means you refuse to let predators hide behind absurdity. The family's greatest shield was laughter. Break that shield and you break the system that allowed them to thrive. Do not be the sailor who saw the truth too late. Be the one who saw the beam for what it was, a trap.